But we don't have any proof, and I don't think you're claiming to have seen the illegal act.
Okay, I may not have seen this particular illegal act, but it has gone on for so many years. Just as the selling of drugs by Dr. George Zahorian has gone on for 15 years in the World Wrestling Federation, witnessed and condoned by Vince McMahon, you see, and condoned by him sitting this close to Dr. Zahorian while he sold steroids, while he sold barbiturates, downers and uppers to every wrestler who wanted them. You see, I'm saying, what I'm trying to say is the man could condone this, so he also condoned the homosexuality. He put up with the drug selling, and he put up with the homosexuality.
Identify the cast of characters here. You mentioned Mal Phillips. He is another of the executives who has resigned.
I don't believe he was an actual executive. He was a ring announcer.
Was he not? Has he not resigned from the WWF?
I believe he has resigned or been fired. I don't know which.
Is he not one of the people who has...
He's one of those who has
stepped down
alleged,
following the publicity about this. Yes. Nobody's been proven guilty. We should get that point. You're denying you recall anything like this, looking the other way.
Not only that, the thing of it is, why not speak up? If I saw something like that, I'd call the authorities. That's what you would do. A 10-year-old boy, you'd call the authorities. Come on. You're not going to let somebody like that get away with that. Please,
you know what? You know why? Why didn't you speak up? Why didn't you speak up when you allowed Dr. George Zahorian to sell barbiturates that almost killed Rick McGraw? They were in his bloodstream when he died, along with all the.
Billy, we're all smarter now about steroids.
But wait a minute. Barbiturate, steroids, plus hardcore drugs that I had 3 overdoses with myself from Dr. Zahorian's drugs. And I tell you one thing: if my wife would have had a gun, she flushed half the drugs down the.
Even now, Hulk Hogan, for example, and McMahon has backed him up that he's never used steroids. Yet we know from the trial that wait a minute, let me
one thing at a time, okay? One at a time. You're just like cluster bombing in here. You know, let's take it one thing at a time. If you want to talk about Hulk, we'll talk about Hulk. If you want to talk about steroids, we'll talk about steroids.
Now let's stay with the first thing first. On the sexual thing. Bruno, the question was, why would Vince want people in his employ propositioning other people in his employ? Why would he want that as a sensible business factor?
You'd have to ask him, because the facts are that these things are going on, that this Mal Phillips, for example, everybody knew about that he liked.
Everybody knew. There has not been one substantiated charge, not one.
Are you saying, Vince, no one ever came into your office and said, Vince, do you know what's going on?
No one came into my office. No one came to anyone else in the WWF.
When you worked for Vince, Bruno, and you were hearing these stories, why didn't you bring it up to Vince?
When Vince Sr. Found out about the Mal Phillips incident, his reaction was that he was not employed by him at that time, and so what the fella did, more or less, it didn't concern him. But ironically, this fella then was hired full-time.
Oh, wait,
now, why would anybody...
You don't have any idea what you're talking about. Mel Phillips has never been an employee of the WWF to this day. Never been an employee. He's been used as occasional labor, Bruno. There you go again.
He was a ring announcer for you.
You saw all of this.
Bruno, when you and Vince were friends, Bruno, and you worked for the WWF, and you heard these stories, why didn't you come to Vince and say, this is what I'm hearing?
Wait a minute. What I heard, of course, as far as Pat Patterson, Terry Garvin, everybody knew about what they were. But, like I said, I wasn't hearing what was going on at that time. Later, when I came back as a color commentator, I started hearing a lot of things about some young wrestlers being approached by these individuals.
I see. You didn't say anything.
No, he didn't say anything.
Not because for one thing, these fellas, you have to understand, wouldn't come forward. Number one, they were afraid to speak because if they did, they were out of the organization. There were no other organizations to go to. Well, why don't you speak to this other fella that's on?
We're going to hear in a moment from Barry Orton, who was known in wrestling circles as Barry O. He'll be with us on the phone. We'll be including your phone calls. This is Larry.
And I thought it was I was shocked when they said it was Tom. I was absolutely shocked.
Lee, I understand Vince McMahon's the CEO of the WWE, right?
Yes.
And ultimately, he's in charge and he's responsible what happens with his company. But he did fire Garvin and Phillips. What else did you expect them to do?
No, he didn't fire them. No, they resigned. They resigned. Okay, and they resigned, and Pat Patterson offered to resign, but they told he didn't actually resign, which they lied about. And if you go back to the Larry King interview with Vince McMahon the night he talked about my brother, and he lied all through it. He said he didn't know nothing of him and stuff, but he was already talking to the lawyers and negotiating. And even Larry King said to him, Vince looked at these, Vince looked at them and said, oh, these three men are gone now and they're not coming back. And that meant all three of them, including Pat Patterson. And yet, all he wanted to do was get Pat Patterson back right away.
So is your point of contention? Is your point of contention is that he brought Pat Patterson back? If he didn't bring Patterson back, would all been forgiven?
Well, what would have been better than anything is that when Tom went back to work, that they gave him an actual chance to work, and didn't make these agreements that they shouldn't have been making. And, this has always been my problems. Any agreements they made should have been done with a lawyer. And they knew what they were doing was wrong. This is a company that deals with lawyers all the time. And so here they are. They have this young man who at that time was uneducated in a room with them. And they're doing all these, they're throwing, and you got to remember, when Tom left that company and sued him again, it was because they locked him in the building when he refused to sign any more contracts. He stopped. He said, "Look, Linda, I'm not going to sign any more things. I'm done." So they locked him in the building and wouldn't let him leave. That's what they did. And when Tom sued him the second time, the lawyer was like, he couldn't believe that they did this to him. And then one day, Tom just stopped showing up. He didn't even come back to see the lawyer. He didn't care no more. He literally disappeared off the face of the earth. He wanted nothing to do with anything no more. He just walked away. I couldn't find him. Nobody could find him. And he was gone for about 4 or 5 months. He literally went into hiding. He didn't want to deal with any of this. That's how much it was affecting him.
I'm not sure if I've got the numbers exact, but in regards to the settlement, Lee, I believe I've heard that originally Tom took 55 thou, and that they even gave you 20 thou. At the end of the day, if you could do this all over again, was the settlement the biggest mistake you made in all of this, both of you, and that you should have just gone for the throat? Like I was saying last week to Mike, I don't understand why you'd let him get away with this if you really knew that you had him.
Yeah.
Do you regret the settlement?
Oh my gosh, yes. And here's why. Here's what I regret. I regret when they told me to stay at the motel. I should have said no. That was the biggest mistake that was made. But then his lawyer, who was corrupt and he was already talking, and without telling us, he was already talking to McDivitt. He never told us. He was talking to McDivitt from home to home. Never came to us and said, "Oh, I talked to McDivitt last night." So right there, the rules were broken. And then on top of that, leaving Tom in the room alone with Vince McMahon, Linda McMahon, and Jerry McDivitt. Who does that? What kind of lawyer does that?
It sounds to me like, unfortunately, your lawyer was Frankie Williams and their lawyer was Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, he made a lot of money, and you know what else he did? Tom just did an interview with Geraldo Rivera that was a big interview. And it would have brought him down. So Vince McMahon asked and paid Tom's lawyer to put an injunction on Geraldo Rivera. Vince McMahon didn't even sue him for an injunction. Tom's lawyer put an injunction on the Geraldo Rivera show. How much do you think he got paid for that? Because Tom sure the hell didn't pay him.
So,
did you ever entertain taking action against the lawyer? He sounds like he didn't do a damn thing for you guys.
Well, here was a mistake.
Or better yet, get another lawyer.
Yeah, get another lawyer. This lawyer sucks.
Well, here's what happened. This lawyer was living off his father's name. His father was a Supreme Court judge.
Oh, great.
And when we went to meet his father, in this big mansion in Rye, and the father kept falling to sleep when we were talking to him. Great. And then his kids come out. The son comes out with the daughter, and they look at the article and they look at each other and go, "Oh, this is big. This is going to really be great," And it's like right at that moment, I should have been scared and ran. But when you have an office across from, right on Avenues of America, across from the New York Public Library, and it's an overwhelming scene. It looks like success, but these people weren't success. Their father was successful. But this is all afterthought. What you find out afterwards isn't what you know at that time.
Lee, in 1993, Linda
Yes.
McMahon was quoted as saying, "Tom has been and continues to be manipulated by his brother, Lee Cole." Linda McMahon told this to the Charleston Post. What are your thoughts about that comment?
Linda McMahon and Vince McMahon already also sued Phil Muchnick and said that Phil Muchnick and I had a plot to bring down the WWE. I didn't even know Phil Muchnick. I talked to him on the phone a couple times, but they're saying that. Can you imagine that? At that time, I was a wanted felon, and they said that I had talked to Phil Muchnick and I got together and conspired to bring the company down. And the only reason they did that with Phil, they knew they weren't going to win that lawsuit, but the judge shut him up and he couldn't talk no more. And then they came after me. Who else was there better to come after? And now they can come after me all they want. I'm going to be around until the day I die. I'm never going to shut up on these people.
Well, this also is troubling me, Lee. I understand your anger against the McMahons. I understand what you've explained this interview so far. Why didn't you feel the same way about wrestlers like Bruno Sammartino or superstar Billy Graham, who were there at that time and also knew what was going on and did not stop it until they left the WWE?
That's not true. No, that's not true. That's not true. I knew Bruno Sammartino. I talked to Bruno Sammartino several times. He did a deposition for us. Bruno knew everything that was going on.
But he did a deposition after he left the company. He didn't stop it when it was going on.
Right.
That's my question to you.
Okay. Bruno was empowered to at least say something when these things were happening under his watch? I mean, he was there, right?
No, I think Bruno worked for Vince's father.
Right.
And you got to remember, Vince's father and Bruno had a good relationship.
Okay.
Bruno had a horrible relationship with Vince McMahon.
How did you feel years later when Bruno, all seemed forgiven?
But wait a minute, hold on. I'm trying to. Lee's just saying right now he had a relationship with Vince's father.
Right.
Are you telling me? So since he had a relationship with Vince's father, he was okay with turning his back on 13-year-old children being sexually molested until he decided to leave the company, and then all of a sudden it was a problem?
You know something? You bring up a good point. I can't answer that. I can't speak for Bruno Sammartino. He's dead.
Right.
You know what?
Because it almost smells like sour grapes. Right.
Well, that's my point. You've got wrestlers who were there, and if this supposedly was going on, why didn't they step in? And then my question to you, Lee, is why don't you want some kind of redemption from these people?
Actually, I do. I'll give you an example. Jesse Ventura, he went up to my brother Tom when Tom first started there and said to him, stay away from that guy. He's a real creep. Okay. And Gorilla Monsoon used to mock these guys when they were wrestling. The back door of Terry Garvin. They all knew. They were all guilty. You know something? I don't really care about what they did. I lost my brother. My brother killed himself, and my brother always told the truth. And I can't, if they let this happen, they have to live with that. If they knew that, it's just like what happened with Penn State. If they knew what was going on, then they have to live with it. They're the ones that did it. Not Tom, not me.
It's a great point, Lee. Again, I want to reference the fans out there to donate for Tommy's girl. Look, people. This was a troubled man who went through a hellacious thing that people shouldn't have to go through. No. And unfortunately, he took his own life. And we're asking people out there to donate to his family.
Lee, what was Tom's final year or so like? I mean, was he, I know you told me he was physically suffering, mentally suffering. Was he still staying active somewhat, or was he now at home and just dealing with his own demons?
He was at home all the time. Between that and COVID happening, he was at home, and he he wasn't the same Tom. The Tom that I always knew was very. When he walked into the room, he was the first person you knew. He was usually the best good-looking guy in the room. He was usually, he was just a whole different type of guy. He literally changed overnight. Everything about him. And here's when he really got upset. He got a hold of Jerry McDivitt, his friend, Jerry McDivitt, and said, Jerry, I need a favor from you guys. He goes, I have insurance and stuff, but I'd like you guys to pay the deductibles for the insurance and give me a hand here. It's really affecting me. And then Jerry says, absolutely not. And then Tom called me and said, I just had a talk with Jerry McDivitt. And then I said to him, Tom, you should have never been talking with that creep. And so Tom was under the assumption this man was his friend. Literally his friend. And then when it came down to Tom asking for us, and then Tom said to him, you guys did this to me, Jerry. You can't help me with my deductibles and stuff? And Jerry said, absolutely not.
Getting back to Bruno, if I can, you obviously, at
Yes.
one point, you spoke with the living legend. You must have had a decent relationship with him. He supported you with his deposition. When he did go back to Vince years later and join the Hall of Fame, were you like muttering under your breath, you fucking sellout? What the fuck is this? Pardon my French, but were you surprised?
Something, in the beginning I was very upset about it, but then when I really talked to people about it and stuff, I wasn't, because Bruno really got screwed. He was a big part of the company for 10, all those years he was champions. That's the guy I remember when I was a kid.
He's Babe Ruth.
He was
He's
the
Babe
show.
Ruth.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they just stuck it to him. They stuck it to him so bad. And, he did, I guarantee you that Bruno probably bit his lips and felt dirty when he had to do what he had to do. And, there's no doubt, because if you remember when he went up against Vince on Larry King and Phil Donahue and stuff, you could see he wanted just to grab Vince by the throat and knock him out. And I'll never forget, there were two people in this that I always respected. It was Bruno and Barry Orton. And because those guys, to me, were never lying, always telling the truth about what happened. And, I'm not going to be mad at Bruno. Bruno deserved to go to the Hall of Fame.
Sure.
He deserved to get some extra money.
Absolutely.
For what he did to that company. They should be ashamed. They should be ashamed. You got to give Bruno credit for holding out all those years.
To be honest,
he held out a long time.
To be honest, it reminded me of when Yogi Berra had the falling out with George Steinbrenner. To be very honest, they stayed away from each other for a very long time, and then somehow at the end, it was, I guess, all was made better.
So, Lee, let me ask you this.
These guys.
Let me ask you this. Outsider looking in, both you and your brother have had trouble with the law.